Sam's back home safe and sound from Atlanta. I'm taking a break from the road for at least a couple of hours between some of these Louisiana spring games, and we appreciate you for tuning in and checking out some of our updates from the past week. This is Louisiana versus All Y'all's Recruit That Boot. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jet Roser. Awful lot to get to. We'll see if we get to all of it because it has been a hectic spring stretch. We know we're going to talk about a couple of new LSU offers, a couple of new highly ranked Louisiana prospects in the latest On300. All four of these guys we're about to talk about are from this 2027 class that continues to look fantastic around the state of Louisiana. And there's a few other topics that, again, hopefully we get a chance to get to with some recruiting developments for LSU targets out of state, a notable in-state target who seems like he's kind of zeroing in on potentially a top two schools and a decision soon to come. Maybe we'll, by the end of this, turn this into another tribute episode for a prospect who's a little bit more under the radar, but seems to be blowing up here pretty quickly. Sam, I know you're happy to be back home, had a great trip in Atlanta and everything, but just enjoying sleeping in your own bed and watching your own television, huh?
The Seinfeld is cranking, and I'm excited to. I missed SNL on Saturday night, so that's the finale of season 50. And I mean, by the time our 7 listeners get to this, they'll probably might be halftime of the Knicks just pounded down the Pacers. It's 1998 all over again, Jarrett. I realized I actually have no Knicks clothing that would fit me because the last time they were good, I was a skinnier
very
man.
Small.
Yeah. My wife actually has my last Knicks shirt. She wears it with her PJs. So, I tried to rep them. I think grown men really shouldn't be wearing too many jerseys. So, and also I have no idea.
False. We're about to get so derailed right now by the 75 jerseys I have.
I have countless jerseys. Okay, I don't know where they currently are in the house. That's like a question for my better half. And I have Patrick Ewing. I love my jerseys, but I'm not going to wear them. I'm 34 years old. I'm not going to wear another man's jersey that I watched when he was 34. So
look. If I can't still be a fan of the NBA, I can't be a fan of anything. All of the football avenues have turned into journalistic endeavors, and I'm just trying to find something where I can still have some non-professional joy, and that for me is the NBA and loving rocking all these jerseys. Look, if you're still looking for one that might be able to fit you, I can see if I can get you an Allen Houston or a Marcus Camby or an Antonio McDyess in time for this. I don't have any of the current guys on this team. I do have a Mikal Bridges, but it's a Brooklyn jersey.
No, I don't have any of the current jerseys either. I don't even think Jalen Brunson was born the last time. If I'm being honest, the last time I bought a Knicks jersey. So that speaks volumes.
I remember as a child playing in my backyard, and we're getting so far derailed from the Louisiana stuff into now Knicks talk, but in my backyard, I would play imaginary games against myself, I guess, on our basketball goal where I'd kind of make up rosters and hold little fantasy drafts of teams where you could take any player who had played during their career for that team or whatever. And I can remember being Rick Brunson in the backyard, which is absurd in and of itself. That just shows my sicko level of NBA fandom as a child and through life. And so now watching Jaylen grow up and be a guy that has the Knicks back to their first conference finals in a quarter decade and trying to go win their first championship in 50 years is pretty crazy. But look, we're way off the rails. As soon as you mention NBA jerseys, that's a surefire way to get me off on that tangent. But let's get back to the recruiting and Louisiana and LSU talking and whatnot that people more come to us for, and start with a couple of those new LSU offers for the 2027 class. Easton Royal becomes the 8th in-state prospect to pick up an offer from the Tigers for that cycle. And then a day later, Braylon Calais from Cecilia becomes the 9th. And so we'll go one by one. Easton is a guy we've talked about a ton on this show, who had a breakout sophomore campaign this fall, was one of 3 sophomores to earn all district distinctions in that Catholic league, which says an awful lot as an underclassman to get that type of an honor in that district in particular. And then just goes out all spring and shows verified speed on the track, 10.38, school record 100-meter in the district meet, second place at the state meet with a 10.4. And so he's showing a consistency level of some high-end speed. The offers have continued to blow up, and LSU joins the mix. Your thoughts on Easton? I think in both of our cases, unsurprisingly, becoming officially an LSU target.
Yeah, Easton had mentioned that he was planning to obviously camp at LSU's elite camp this summer for Friday Night Lights. But as we spoke about a week or two ago on one of those episodes, LSU and the staff has been more willing to put offers out earlier and earlier for in-state kids than any of the previous staffs, way earlier than Les Miles. And even earlier than Ed Orgeron was willing to offer, and I think that kind of goes to show with they're more caught up with the times of not having to wait, and still obviously these kids are willing, when you're Easton's age at 2027 going into your junior season, willing to go camp at the school to make your offer committable. But obviously I love the offer. We know about the verified times. We've seen him at multiple different settings between OT7. The Under Armour camp in New Orleans, and then the Rivals camp in Dallas. And he has been either one of or the best player on the field, especially for his own class. But we're talking about competing with and against 2026 prospects. His speed is real. He separates at a high level. He's got fantastic range and a great radius. When I was first evaluating him around this time last year, I kind of felt like he was, and I had not seen him in person, I felt like he was a little bit of a smaller spark plug receiver. But he is big and he's got room to grow. So to me, it's been Easton Royal's offseason. Not surprising to see LSU offer. Not surprising to see his stock continue to rise. And if he does end up at LSU, first brother Martin to LSU connection since Will Clapp.
Yep, 100%. If he signs, he would be the first scholarship signee. I think they've had some other walk-ons join the program in the interim, but he would be the first, signing class signee since Will. Good job. The timing aspect you mentioned, I think it's important if we have, prospects or parents or whoever that kind of tune in, as much as you say LSU is more open to making some earlier moves than maybe we have seen in some recent history. It's important to know they're still extremely selective in state. And so we're talking about 14 2026 guys right now that have offers, 9 2027 guys, all really, high-end elite guys that are kind of no-brainer takes if it gets to that point where they do want to go to LSU. And so even in Easton's case, he was surprised by the offer when it came last Wednesday. He was thinking he's going to go to camp and hopefully earn that offer then. That's kind of what my anticipated timeline was. And he and I had talked about that a few times of just, remaining patient. And to his credit, he's a kid that at that age has shown some pretty notable strides in his maturity and the way that he's approaching a lot of things. And so he was pretty unfazed by the timeline and said he walked into Coach Bonis's office last week, saw Frank Wilson and still didn't realize, hey, LSU might be about to offer me until he heard the words, and that he was kind of jumping around, excited to celebrate that moment. He's got an awful lot of great offers to choose from and a long time before he has to choose. It'll be probably another year before he makes his decision next spring or even next summer, but a huge addition to his recruiting process, as last week were Texas and Florida State and Nebraska and some others, but a guy that I knew was a really talented pass catcher, had a solid build to him, was really smooth in his route running and showed a knack early on for kind of finding holes in zones and things like that, settling into some places and catching anything thrown his way with that radius you mentioned. But just blazing those speeds all spring have really opened up his recruitment in a huge way. And so that's been an awful lot of fun to see for a guy who's been an awful lot of fun to cover so far in his high school career.
Yeah, and to your point, I think you hit it on the head. The 2026 and 2027 classes in Louisiana are exceptional. 14 offers in 2026. has to be almost as deep of a group of blue chip prospects as probably that 2016 group that LSU also, I think, dipped in double digits in the state, and already 9 offers in 2027. And I know we're going to talk about another one coming up here shortly, but 9 offers before camp season. You can only imagine that they dip into the 10, 11, 12, so on next month when a lot of those in-state prospects head to campus for in search of that offer. And I think we're going to talk about a couple more later who are ranked pretty high in the new On300 that very likely will wind up with LSU offers before it's said and done.
And I may have even, now that I'm thinking about it as we talk more about it, I may have even juiced that 26 number by 1 because it might only be 13. And, either way, 13 or 14, we don't have to spend too much time checking back on that or me sitting here writing out the list when we've got
we'll check the fact checker after the show. You know that.
Yeah, we need Tony Reale sitting by to let us know at the end of this if I botched that or not. But the other 2027 offer a day later, another guy that we were, I'm sure, both completely unsurprised to hear picks up his Tigers offer was Braylon Calais. Fantastic, versatile weapon for that Sicilia team that won its championship since 1995, with Braylon as a 3-phase playmaker for those guys, an all-state honorable mention guy on offense, working primarily out of the backfield as a 1,000-yard rusher alongside Diesel Solari for that team, but a guy that has been ranked primarily as a wide receiver, despite the fact that he plays all over the field. While we don't see a ton of him yet in his high school games catching the ball downfield, he has some speed to get downfield. He has some high-level ball skills and strong hands to go up over guys and make tough contested catches, and is just a guy with a physical build right now that is an awful lot of trouble for defensive backs at the high school level to try and deal with when he wants to get physical as a pass catcher. But Braylon, Thursday night after the spring game, picks up that offer. Your takeaways halfway through his high school career at this point as he becomes the 9th 2027 prospect in state to pick up the offer from LSU.
Yeah, you're talking about such a unique prospect that Mario Cristobal loves at the linebacker position, that Cortez Hankton loves at the wide receiver position. Personally, getting a chance to see him play out of the backfield, play on the defensive side of the ball, play out wide at receiver, catching the ball. I don't care what he plays at the next level. He could, he could be a hybrid safety or a receiver. I love the profile. I love the production. I love that every time whether it's in a 7-on-7 setting or on the field, he is around the football. He is constantly making plays with the ball in his hands, and he's a home run threat, whether it's on offense or defense. And I think that he's going to be a special teams ace down the stretch as well, given that skill set. I think it was just a matter of time before LSU offered. I'm sure they were by Cecilia earlier this spring, trying to figure out, whether it was going to be Blake Baker and using that skill set on the defensive side of the ball, or whether Tez was going to win this battle. And it looks like Tez got to win this one. It reminds me of when Mickey Joseph and Corey Raymond were debating whether Keishon Butte would play corner or receiver out of Wampville. But I love that skill set. I'm excited for Braylon. Seeing him in the Superdome last year left such a big impression on me. But he's constantly been in our eye as one of those top guys in the state. And good to see him, again, get an offer before he ultimately will camp, I'm assuming, next month.
I'm with you, man. Just get that dude in the door and he can play somewhere and you'll be happy about it regardless. I think that position dynamic has been one of the biggest questions with him for folks when they get a chance to see him for the first time or hear about him or watch his film or whatnot. I go back to watching him at the end of his 8th grade year when the Cecilia rising freshmen that were kind of incoming, that 27 class, were able to start practicing with Diesel and Brent Gordon and company on a good Cecilia team. And suddenly there's this already as big as anyone out on the practice field 8th grader in Braylon Calais, who's standing out physically. And then they get him a little quick kind of screen pass to the outside, and he opens up and is able to run away from a pretty fast team as a whole. there. And so he was eye-catching then, and as he continued to develop physically, we're there in the Superdome and telling people, keep an eye on this kid. That's the kid from Cecilia in the years to come that we're going to be tout. And then they're asking, well, what position do you think he's going to play? And it's kind of, I don't know. The kid's 15 years old. He might turn into an edge rusher by the end of all this, and he's got the physicality and willing physicality to his game where he's not someone that I'd be worried about that as much. You have some guys that you look at and say, if they grow to a certain point, do they kind of grow out of this position or into that position? And how does it kind of change their outlook depending on, how strong they are and how willing they are as a physical player? Braylon is willing as anyone to go hit somebody or to deal with some contact and try and break some tackles and go make plays. And so he's someone that I'm really excited about as just a really well-rounded football player anywhere on the field.
And his recruitment is really just taking off. I mean, Miami was an early contender, put an early offer on the table, and I think he's been there twice now in consecutive springs.
Mm-hmm.
He's been to LSU a few times. I know that he visited SMU a little bit earlier this spring, and that visit was really eye-catching as SMU, as we know, Ja'Kai Anderson has already flipped from LSU to SMU. SMU is very quickly realizing all the talent that's inside the boot. But, obviously I'd probably say LSU has an early advantage now with Braylon moving forward, but his recruitment is just taking off. And it'll be interesting to see now that the Tigers have offered, who's going to follow suit, who's going to try to make this thing a little bit interesting and make him feel wanted like Tez Hankton has.
Both these guys, while LSU is now one of the latest offers, have been in Baton Rouge a few times. There's definitely a level of rapport and comfortability with the program and the coaches and players and that are already in Baton Rouge. And so it's still early on for these guys. There's a long way to go before decisions get made. It's still a fairly early offer for LSU, but they are well positioned in terms of not starting these relationships from scratch by any means with these guys. Question for you, based on what you just said, are you saying that SMU didn't realize Louisiana had football talent until just recently? The light bulb just kind of went off for those guys?
I mean, you could look at the track record. I can't say that they've signed too many from Louisiana over the years. Listen, Dallas is a big metroplex, and Texas is a big backyard. But sometimes the talent and the cooking and the people are just so good in Louisiana, you want to get your toes wet and explore a little bit. Nothing wrong with that, Jarrett. It's called expanding your horizons.
Sticking right there in the 337 as we kind of shift gears to some of these other 2027 prospects who debuted in the On300 just today as we record this on Tuesday. Karon Eugene, son of former NFL safety Hiram Eugene, folks will remember from that state championship game where he helped his Panthers at Catholic New Iberia win their first state championship since 2017. I had 11 tackles, some of which were kind of explosive tone-setting tackles, and then obviously the game-sealing interception at the goal line late. He debuts at number 135 in the country for On3, and so a guy that is, a long, rangy guy at that safety position, but really versatile in his ability. I think he had 6 or 7 interceptions this fall in an all-state sophomore campaign, but it isn't shy to get physical in his own right. I know you've watched a little bit of Eugene, who is a multi-sport guy for his Panthers, but someone that we think has a chance to be a really special safety at the next level.
Yeah, I think both of our top performers from the Superdome this past year. You talked about his NFL bloodlines. You talked about multiple sports. You talked about multiple interceptions as a sophomore last season. Someone that, again, isn't right in Corey Raymond's hometown in New Iberia, and someone who I think is kind of geared. You talked about his physicality, geared to play that nickel position, which Louisiana produces at such a high clip. But Karon, safety, nickel, easy target for LSU. You could see down the road.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he's not someone that we're talking about in that category we just finished up talking about here soon, where an offer enters the fold here sooner than later.
Probably during camp season. I'm sure they want to see, how he tests and whatnot. But I guess I didn't really explain where I was going. But to follow up on that conversation earlier, like you said, they're offering early, but these are some of the top guys in state that they're probably going to have in the camp setting next month.
For sure. And in terms of transition points, we did the 337 to 337. Now we talk about another guy that was outstanding in his performance in the Superdome this year as a sophomore, another, relevant bloodline type guy with an older brother who's now signed and heading to LSU here shortly. And coincidentally, another safety prospect who had 11 tackles in that Superdome game in December. Jayden Anding was the outstanding player performer for his Ruston team and what was a tough overall showing for those guys against a Central Baton Rouge buzzsaw in December. But Jayden was one of the bright spots, 11 tackles, 2.5 for loss. Like older brother, Jayden Anding is a multi-sport guy for his Ruston Bearcats. Jayden a little bit bigger than Aiden, especially at this point in his development, a little bit more physically, as you can a little bit more physical, as you might be able to tell from 11 tackles and 2.5 for loss in the Superdome. But Jayden is another guy who clearly on LSU's radar. They haven't made the move just yet. He debuts at number 174 in the nation amongst all prospects in that class, and one of the top safety prospects nationally for 2027. Your early thoughts on the next Anding brother that folks around Louisiana are going to be talking about for the years to come?
Yeah. Well, you talked about the 11 tackles filling in for Big Bro, who obviously was dealing with the concussions as Ruston attempted to repeat as state champions. So Jayden in a big spot got burnt on, I think, one of the first couple plays out. You talked about that Central buzzsaw. Well, that offense and their junior receiver just went off in that game, and Jayden rebounded exceptionally and being one of the highlights for that defense as they tried to keep pace with Central. But Jayden actually worked out in New Orleans, like you said. He's as big, if not bigger, than Aiden at this point going into his junior season. So he's got a lot of football ahead of him. Probably going to play safety, but again was able to play cornerback in the state championship. Physical, willing to tackle, and then at his natural position at safety, able to roam and a little bit of a ball hawk. You love his enforcing, mentality that you love on a Ruston defense. But yeah, I think he's someone obviously with the bloodlines, someone we can probably expect to see at LSU camp, and picked up all those same offers from Texas, Miami, Arkansas as Aiden went through the recruiting process. But now as he gets more comfortable, I'd expect his own timeline to start picking up sooner rather than later.
And you look at a Ruston team that just graduated a fantastic 2025 class after that fantastic 2024 class with Ahmad Bro and those guys. And there's two of the nation's top 175 prospects in that 2027 class now, where Jayden joins Ahmad Hudson. And so while it's going to be to some degree a little bit of a rebuilding year where there's a lot of fresh faces and bigger roles now for the Bearcats, Coach Ball and company certainly have some talent continuing to work its way through that Ruston program. Looking at a couple of just kind of updates on the recruiting front and, some notable names, a couple particularly on the LSU side. You logged a prediction for JJ Bush, a linebacker out in Mobile, Alabama. And it sounds like for folks, here in Baton Rouge wearing the same purple and gold colors I've got on today, that it's something that they may want to go check out at Rivals, huh?
I think this is a decision is not far off. Wouldn't be surprised if by this time next month, a commitment might be made. Mississippi State has been a team that's been trending at one point. Missouri kind of picked up steam at a different point this spring. But on the road, that Blake Baker loves the city of Mobile. He's addicted to it. Hearing that LSU is now in the driver's seat with JJ Bush, he's going to OV on June 12th. I moved my prediction onto LSU. I feel good about them closing. And then I also logged a prediction for your boy, Darius Gray. number one or number two interior offensive lineman in the country, depending, where you look. But Brad Davis, Joe Sloan shifted their attention from Lamar Brown on the offensive line to defensive line, opened the door to really go all in on Darius Gray. I was told that his visit earlier this spring not only impressed him, but his mom really liked Brad Davis, really liked your boy Joe Sloan. I moved my prediction from South Carolina.
What's not to love?
Exactly. So I moved. My prediction was on South Carolina. I think South Carolina is still the biggest threat to LSU in this one. But LSU is kind of the team best position going into these OVs. He'll visit, I think, at the end of this month. He'll get South Carolina last. It's going to be a tight one, but I like where LSU is sitting there too.
If I start asking Blake Baker about Mardi Gras, he's not going to start hyping up the Mobile Mardi Gras that I always have to hear about, is he? He's going to.
If he does, he'll be banned from this podcast. That's a no. I feel equally as it's as polarizing a topic as basketball jerseys is for you.
I don't believe you have a prediction in for Bo Bentley just yet. Let's talk a little bit about him, though, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. But Bo is now down to his final two he announced this weekend, and LSU continues to make that cut. It's LSU, it's Oklahoma in the mix, a decision expected in June after he has a chance to knock out these OVs to both of those campuses, places he's had a chance to get to before. But, once that one final more detailed look and time with those coaches, where do you think the Tigers stand with a guy who has been as high profile and as high a priority at that quarterback position in 2026 for LSU and Coach Joe Sloan and company as anyone? It seemed like there's a good relationship there with Joe and the Tigers staff and Bo, but Oklahoma obviously still there in the mix, and a neighboring state just like Louisiana, just a little bit farther north from his Salina, Texas home.
Yeah. Well, even though he officially ruled out Georgia over the weekend, this has been a two-team race for about a month at this point. Joe Sloan and the Tigers, Ben Arbuckle and the Sooners going toe-to-toe for Bo Bentley, who helped Salina to a state championship at Texas last year, was an All-American as a junior, grew up rooting on Oklahoma and the Sooners. But that wasn't the Brent Venable Sooners. That wasn't the Ben Arbuckle Sooners. More of a Lincoln Riley, now USC's head coach. So listen, everyone is saying that he's a fan of Oklahoma, not to discount that. I wouldn't read as much into that as much as people are. I feel pretty confident he's going through this with pretty unbiased. And with that being the case, Ben Arbuckle is John Mateer's coach, who just had an excellent season. He coached Cam Ward, who was just the number one pick in the draft. So he's listening to Oklahoma. He's also listening very much to LSU. I think of all the spring visits he took, he visited Florida State, Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, Michigan. I think his time in Baton Rouge was the visit that moved the needle the most. He went to the baseball game. He went on his unofficial visit. And I think the relationship with Joe Sloan can't be underestimated. Joe Sloan missed on a quarterback last year when Bryce Underwood flipped to Michigan. That's an attractive spot for quarterbacks right now, especially, just Colin Hurley and, behind Nussmeier on that roster. There's and Bo is not the kind of kid that is looking to come in and compete for a playing time next year. With that being said, all that in the backdrop, this is very tight. I think it's too close to call. I would say it's as close to 50-50 as it gets going into these OVs. Oklahoma has a quarterback committed, Jayden O'Neal, who's now living in Mustang, Oklahoma, but there's a sense that he will not be in this class. I'm sure that is being communicated to Bo. We'll see how the dice rolls with that. It's a lot of moving pieces in this recruitment. I think that's why it's too hard to make a call, but I felt good about LSU with the first part of the spring, and I would say my confidence has waned a bit, even though Georgia's officially been ruled out. All I know is these official visits are going to be very telling, very important toward what's probably going to be a decision that's going to be made this time next month.
Will be interesting to watch. Obviously, no position on the football field, if not, I mean, in sports is more spotlighted, and for good reason, than that quarterback spot on the football field. And so a lot of eyes are going to be on Bo Bentley. Will be interesting to see where that ultimate announcement ends up. From talking about a few out-of-state guys who may have a chance of ending up in Louisiana for college, to a guy in Louisiana for high school who looks like he's heading elsewhere for college. Dylan Berryman, the fantastic defensive lineman up at Ouachita Parish, looks like he's down to Texas and Purdue. And I know you had a story out on him, I think today or in the last couple of days, a guy that I've had as a top 10 guy in the state throughout his high school career. A guy that's pretty versatile for that Lions defensive front. Sounds like he had a great spring game up north against Evangel Christian this week. What's your kind of latest on Dylan and where he appears to be headed for college that, I think surprises some folks about where it sounds like he may be heading for college from down here in the boot?
Yeah, really, really interesting recruitment. If you have been monitoring this thing from the jump, LSU and Oregon were early leaders for Dylan Berryman, and then LSU started to kind of pull away from the pack. It got a little bit more interesting at the top of this offseason. A lot of visits out to Mississippi State, a lot of visits out to USC and Texas, and I would say in February, March, I felt like USC was the team to beat. Now USC is out. He's visited Austin a few times, like I mentioned, and made an official visit out to Purdue. And there's a lot of confidence up in West Lafayette about Dylan Berryman's chances of going up there and playing in the Big Ten. I think that kind of speaks for volumes on how that official visit went. But I'm told that a decision is not imminent. He's going to wait this out until June 6th. That'll be his Texas OV. I would not be surprised if he still ends up visiting Starkville on May 30th. Mississippi State replaced UNC as his, second official visit now on the end of this month. Mississippi State has been a longtime contender with Dylan. So they're going to try to get into this as this decision potentially winds down. But as far as I'm concerned, this is Purdue's race to lose. My prediction sitting on the Boilermakers. And I think the only thing that they're waiting to see is whether they have the green light from Texas or Mississippi State that this could get interesting late.
Wrapping up with another in-state guy who, coincidentally, the last time I saw Dylan in person was on this young man's field in the playoffs. Jackson Fields, I mentioned we might get to a chance to talk about a kind of a more under the radar, underrated type prospect that we could turn it into the official tribute episode for another guy following the lead of Isaiah Washington of Haynesville last week. Jackson Fields, we'll talk next week a little bit more about some of my takeaways from all of the spring travels the last few weeks, but he's been such an interesting story the last week since that spring game against Edna Carr, where chatting with him that night, Nicholls State felt like they were in great position with him. He had some other FCS offers, but Nicholls State was hoping to kind of hold off a potential push from a South Alabama and a Troy, who were both hoping to host Jackson in June. Suddenly a little bit of a highlight reel comes out from the spring game where he's on the move, putting balls on the money deep downfield to Jabari Mack on rollouts. And since then, just since Wednesday, West Georgia, Millsaps, Jackson State, and Central Arkansas all offer. Ohio State, Oklahoma, Tulane, Alabama, LSU, Florida State all say, hey, why don't you come camp? Let's check you out a little bit more closely here this June. And so kind of a crazy social media era storyline for Jackson here as he wraps up his junior year to suddenly have some really big schools coming into the mix and wondering, hey, maybe we should take a closer look at this guy as, a potential pivot opportunity here in the summer before his senior year. We've both had a chance to watch a lot of Jackson as we make our runs, through Destrehan. He's a kid that I've had in Prep Red Zone Louisiana's top 20 for the class throughout his high school career and brings an awful lot to the table. What's it like to see him start to get a little bit of buzz here late in the process for him with some new schools kind of entering the mix? And what do you think he brings to the table that might be worth some of these schools looking at?
Well, yeah, it's awesome to see. That's first and foremost. This is a kid going into his senior season, and as we kind of say, look how early LSU is throwing out offers to Easton Royal and Braylon Calais. Like, Jackson Fields is going to his senior season uncommitted right now, and he's looking for an opportunity. And this is crunch time for him. So hopefully this works out to his favor. And you love to see that 4 new offers come in after a spring game, which is going to make him, amplifies his options a little bit more. You mentioned some of the schools that also I'd like to note. Florida State was a school looking at Jackson early on in his high school career. You can ask former Destrehan OC, now Hahnville head coach Greg Boyne, that Coach Norvell and his staff were certainly paying attention. And now you're seeing schools like Ohio State and Alabama and LSU, and something this all has in common. These are all schools that signed, either with the exception of LSU, but blue chip, 5-star elite quarterbacks last year. Keelan Russell was the number 1 player in the country. Tavian St. Clair at Ohio State was a 5-star consensus. They're having trouble trying to find 2026 quarterbacks to commit behind them. LSU, as we just said, is 50-50 in a toss-up situation for their top target, Bo Bentley. If things go south and Jackson is able to turn some heads in these camps, those schools are looking for the next best option. And if that means, a camp standout, it might just be Jackson Fields' turn. So this could get very interesting depending on how some of these dominoes fall in the quarterback carousel around the country. And that includes LSU.
Exactly why, as much as I didn't know if we'd get to Jackson today or if we just kind of save it and talk some more about him during a little bit more spring football talk next week, when you talked about the Bo Bentley dynamic, I thought it made sense to mention that Jackson will be in Baton Rouge for camp that Friday Night Lights weekend in the back half of June, at the end of a string of trips all over the country now that have been added to his schedule in a matter of days. He's a guy that we've talked so much about, these Destrehan receivers through the years, but he's been kind of the straw that stirs the drink for that offense, particularly last year, where when they went through a little bit of a midseason struggle, it was because Jackson was sidelined with injury. And when he came back, they surged late last season with his kind of handle on that offense and ability to distribute the ball around to all of those great weapons, coming through DHS. And on top of what he's able to do throwing the ball around, and you saw some of it on those highlights with his ability to throw the ball on the move, he can move a little bit too and make some plays with his legs, and he's not shy of running through or over somebody if he has to for some tough yards around the goal line. And so there's a lot to like about Jackson Fields and the way he leads an offense, some of the throws he can make, some of the plays he can make with his legs, and just brings an awful lot to that table for sure.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how quickly things pick up, and you love the opportunity that he gets to have. He gets to go and earn his potential offer at a lot of these schools, and I hope that he still goes to some of those in-state or local schools that have already put offers on the table to keep them in mind, and hope it works out well for him.
For sure, because I know that Colonel staff is really excited about him if there's an opportunity to keep him close to home and go play his college ball in Thibodaux. But we'll have a chance to talk about some other fantastic standouts from around the state's spring action next week. I'm heading out to another spring game here as soon as we hang up. But Sam, appreciate you, of course, making some time in a busy Tuesday afternoon.
Absolutely.
He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. This is Louisiana vs. All Y'all's Recruit That Boot. And until next time, y'all be well.
Go Knicks.
Bing bong.